All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the legendary management principles of Silicon Valley veteran Ben Horowitz. If you've ever built a product, scaled a startup, or tried to lead a team through a massive crisis, you probably already know that textbook management theory usually shatters the second it hits reality. Well, today, we're exploring the frameworks born from exactly that reality. These aren't polished concepts dreamed up in some comfortable business school seminar. They were literally forged in the absolute trenches of the dot-com crash.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty tough question to reflect on, which really sets the high stakes for our discussion today. Are you the CEO of your product, or just a marketing resource? I want you to really think about that for a second. In this context, a marketing resource is someone who just takes what other people have already built and tries to package it up nicely. This question is the dividing line between those who actually drive a product's destiny, taking the heat when things inevitably go wrong, and those who just passively react to whatever is happening around them.
It's crazy to think about, but this all started with a single internal memo written over 15 years ago about product management. A memo that honestly still defines tech leadership today. And the thing is, it was never meant for the public. It was penned by Ben Horowitz and David Wyden in the early days to fix a deeply broken culture and define what it actually takes to win. At the time, they were just incredibly frustrated with product managers acting like glorified paper pushers, constantly making excuses for why features were late or why the market wasn't responding. They desperately needed a reset. They needed to define the absolute extreme level of ownership required to build something that actually survives.
Section 1. Forged in the Struggle. The Loud Cloud and Opsware Crucible.
Look, these aren't just academic theories. They are hard-won lessons from surviving absolute chaos. Horowitz's credibility was forged in an intense crucible of corporate crises. He founded LoudCloud right before the dot-com crash. Just imagine the visceral panic of the entire market collapsing around you. He managed to navigate a highly distressed IPO when the window was practically slamming shut. And then he survived a devastating $25 million default from a key customer. Honestly, most companies would just fold right there. Instead, he executed this insane pivot, divesting their core business and rebranding as Opsware. He went from facing a near delisting on the NASDAQ, wondering if payroll would even clear, to eventually achieving a massive $1.65 billion exit to HP. He calls this terrifying, gut-wrenching period the struggle. And let me tell you, the rules of the struggle are very different from the rules of normal business.
Section 2. CEO of the product. The good PM versus bad PM.
Let's break down this stark contrast of how product managers view their own roles. A good product manager, they take complete, absolute ownership of success and act like the CEO of the product. They don't just participate in the process, they drive the vision forward, doing whatever it takes. A bad product manager, on the other hand, relies entirely on excuses. They'll tell you there's a lack of funding, or the engineers are just too overworked, or the competition is too heavily entrenched. They view themselves super narrowly as a marketing resource. Just picture a bad PM running frantically back and forth between the sales team and the engineering team, basically acting as an administrative gopher relaying messages rather than actually leading the product's direction.
Here's a vital distinction. Good PMs crisply define the target value for the market. They completely obsess over the what. They give clear, formal direction on what needs to be built to solve the customer's exact problem. Bad ones? Well, they get completely lost in the technical weeds. They actually feel best about themselves when they're trying to figure out the how. But the problem is, when a product manager starts dictating the how, they inevitably start micromanaging the engineers. This totally destroys engineering morale, halts momentum, and slows down development, all because the PM is doing a job they aren't actually qualified to do while completely neglecting the market analysis they're paid for.
It's all about context. Understanding your company's goals, your financial constraints, and what your customers really demand is what separates true visionaries from folks who are just putting out fires all day long. A good PM knows this market context absolutely cold. A bad PM misses the big picture entirely. Instead of deeply understanding the competitor landscape, a bad PM will literally argue with engineering for hours over minor UI colors. They react blindly to whichever competitor just released a shiny new feature, they blindly listen to the loudest complaining customers without digging into the actual use case, and crucially, they try to fiercely defend their lack of knowledge rather than doing the hard work of gaining it.
Section 3. Communication and Discipline, the Mechanisms of Success.
Visionary ideas are completely useless without the operational mechanics to actually execute them. Horowitz measures discipline in a manager's daily routine heavily through their ability to write. Relying on written communication, especially maintaining a living product requirements document, ensures everyone, from engineering to QA to marketing, shares a single unified vision. Bad PMs give directions informally. They might have a bad feeling about a feature but leave it murky, putting off the hard decisions. We've all seen the absolute chaos of a late-cycle product disaster. Features clashing, deadlines missed, QA failing, and it's almost always because someone didn't take the time to definitively write down the actual requirements at the start of the process.
And this discipline? It creates immense operational leverage. A good PM empowers their sales force with robust FAQs, deep dive white papers, and standardized presentations. Salespeople want to close deals. They don't want to wait 3 days for a PM to answer an email. Because a good PM focuses on making the sales team money by equipping them properly, they are absolutely loved by the sales organization. A bad PM, on the flip side, spends all day answering the exact same ad hoc questions over and over again, constantly complaining to anyone who will listen about being swamped while never actually building the collateral needed to scale their own knowledge.
Moving on to Section 4, Peacetime versus Wartime Leaders, the Survival Shift.
Zooming out to the CEO level for a minute, leaders have to fundamentally shift their behavior when the company's survival is directly threatened. Horowitz has this dramatic, amazing quote. A wartime CEO thinks the competition is sneaking into her house and trying to kidnap her children. That intense, almost paranoid mindset is exactly what's required when a company has only one bullet left in the chamber. Horowitz realized that almost every management book you pick up at the airport only teaches peacetime leadership, how to foster creativity, build consensus, and expand market share. But when the market completely crashes or a competitor threatens to wipe you off the map tomorrow, you cannot manage the same way. The rules of peacetime will literally kill you in wartime.
Just contrast the collaborative approach you'd normally use against the strict, directive alignment needed during an existential crisis. In peacetime, you genuinely strive for broad-based buy-in. You want to encourage creativity across diverse objectives. But in wartime, a leader simply cannot indulge in consensus building. They have to be completely intolerant of disagreement because the survival of the company depends on strict adherence to a single, hyper-focused mission. Building consensus takes time, and time is the one resource you absolutely do not have when your ship is rapidly taking on water.
A peacetime CEO spends a ton of time meticulously defining corporate culture and protocol, really focusing on team building and core values. But wartime leaders, they will purposefully break protocol and sometimes even use profanity if it means hitting the prime directive and surviving. They let the war define the culture. For example, a wartime CEO might ruthlessly obsess over a single line of latency-causing code because it's costing them key clients, while completely and totally ignoring things like the dress code, formal performance reviews, or office layouts. They will care about a microscopic detail if it interferes with winning, and they'll happily discard everything else.
Section 5. Visionaries and Operators. Ones versus twos.
So Horowitz breaks leadership down into two cognitive profiles, the ones and the twos. There's this inherent tension between the idea-driven ones and the execution-optimized twos. The ones are your strategic visionaries. They are incredible at finding the path forward and seeing around corners, but their most common deficit is that they actively avoid building detailed execution processes. Think of someone like Bill Gates in the early days, a classic one who had the brilliant vision for Microsoft, but eventually needed operational powerhouses to actually manage that massive machine. The twos are those operational powerhouses, like elite chief operating officers. They optimize everything, but they often struggle to conceive a radical strategic pivot when the core business model fails. The reality is, a successful organization desperately needs both profiles, but they almost never exist naturally within the exact same person.
Section 6. The Calculus of Survival. Rejecting Probability.
When executives face existential decisions and the odds are just completely stacked against them, they must fundamentally reject probability. If a leader relies on statistics during a massive crisis, they're going to be totally paralyzed. Let's do the math on this for a second. Imagine you're facing multiple independent risks to keep your company alive. You need to secure emergency funding, you need to fix a fatal software bug, and you need to stop your top engineers from quitting. Let's say each of those things only has a 10% chance of success. Well, if you multiply those fractions together, the statistical probability of surviving all of them at once mathematically approaches 0. Statistically speaking, you are already dead.
This means a leader has to treat survival not as a distribution of probabilities, but as a singular path that must be forced into existence. Horowitz frequently uses this awesome metaphor of lead bullets. When you're facing a massive threat, everyone wants a silver bullet, right? A magical, easy solution that fixes everything instantly. But there are no silver bullets. There are only lead bullets. You have to go through the front door, do the hard, painful, exhausting work, and deal with the threat head-on. You don't play the odds when the odds say you'll die. You find the single path to survival and you execute it deterministically.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. I want you to think about your own approach to leadership during a crisis. When everything is on the line, when your product is failing, the market is crashing, and the statistics say you will inevitably fail, will you succumb to the math or will you do the calculus to survive? Thanks for exploring these frameworks with me, and keep building.